is Ty Baker. I graduated from Foothill last spring, and I began my first semester at CSUMB this fall. I interned with the Department of Global Ecology at the Carnegie Institute of Science in Dr. Anna Michelet's lab under Kelsey Foster, a fifth-year PhD candidate. And welcome to Understanding Methane Emissions in U.S. Wetlands. So why do we care? In the public space, we often hear phrases like X activity emits Y amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide emissions dominate our minds and media cycles. However, methane has warming potential orders of magnitude greater than CO2. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, methane's global warming potential is 81.2. And if you're anything like I was at the beginning of my internship, you have no idea what that means. So I will put it very simply. If there were a leak of 1 ton of methane, it would be equivalent to releasing 81.2 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Methane has been studied for years, but there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding how much of it is released into the atmosphere each year by both natural and man-made actors. So hopefully now it's a bit clearer why we should care about methane emissions in general, but you might be wondering about the wetlands piece. What's the big deal? Well, to put it simply, wetlands are the largest natural source of methane emissions. They account for about a third of methane emissions worldwide, and they're only outstripped by man-made contributors, right? And there's a little graph down there. Wetlands are at the top. And then, of course, the next 3 items are man-made emissions. Kelsey's research, among a host of other things, involves investigating uncertainties associated with our understanding of the Earth's carbon cycle. The carbon cycle refers to how carbon circulates between the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, plants, soils, living organisms, et cetera, et cetera. This includes some greenhouse gases, such as CO2 and methane, and her research aims to enhance our knowledge of how the terrestrial biosphere helps to offset or mitigate those man-made greenhouse gas emissions. During my internship, my contribution to this research was working with the FluxNet CH4 dataset, focusing specifically on wetlands in the continental US. And my goal was to determine which variables in that dataset were most correlated with wetland methane fluxes. To understand the methods we used, it's necessary to understand where I began. The raw data looks something like this, only it's several thousand lines longer. And in this form, this data set is just that. It's an amalgamation of numbers, and it's probably something out of most of our worst nightmares. So using Python and several libraries within like NumPy, Matplotlib, and stats models, I performed exploratory data analysis on this data. And you can think of EDA as turning this collection of data into some information. And using scatter plot matrices and correlation coefficients, I selected the variables that I felt were most likely to lead to meaningful regression results. Water table depth, gross primary productivity, and precipitation. And during this process, missing data has to be identified and it has to be removed from any columns of interest. And because a linear regression has to run on rectangular data, the removal of a value from any data column results in the loss of the entire row, which causes the data set to go from several thousand lines long to several hundred, like this. All of that was in pursuit of the final step, running the linear regression. And there's a little bit of code from the regression. There's a bit more, but it's a lot and nobody cares about it but us, right? So from the regression, I was able to glean some useful information. For example, the results indicate a positive relationship between temperature and CH4 flux, a negative relationship between CH4 flux and water table depth, and a negative relationship between precipitation and methane flux. There's a lot of stuff to unpack in these results, and I just don't have the time to do it in detail, and I'm sure I couldn't quite do it justice if I tried, but it all boils down to a little bit of nuance. Because so many factors contribute to changes in any one of these individual variables, it can never be as simple as saying one variable is or is not correlated with methane fluxes. And it's also important to note that by running a linear regression, we are starting with the assumption that the relationship between these variables is linear, and that very well may not be the case. Because our data set is missing so much data, the next step would be to explore the possibility of using gap-filled data or switching to a new data set entirely and running the regressions again. The ultimate goal here is to determine which variables are important drivers of carbon dioxide and methane fluxes in the Arctic, where they're often co-emitted. Anyone who's spoken to me for more than a few minutes knows how much I love writing code and how important it is to me to contribute to the battle against climate change. And this internship gave me the opportunity to combine those two things. And I absolutely love working in this space, so much so that I've decided to work toward pursuing a master's in environmental science. I also got a tiny peek into how much work it takes to manipulate big data and turn it into something valuable, useful. And finally, this cemented the urgency of the climate crisis for me, as if I needed such a thing. And as always, I would like to thank my lovely wife, Sarah, and our kids, Davina and Asan. You guys keep me grounded, supported, and motivated. Thank you to SLI and Foothill College. And thank you so much, Marissa, Sophia. You two changed my life. And nothing that I have or am doing today is possible without help from both of you. And last but certainly not least, thank you to Kelsey Foster. Thank you for your mentorship, your patience, your understanding, and stewarding me through this as I navigated the internship and a billion other things that were going on in my life this summer. And I just couldn't have asked for a better teacher. Thank you so much.